Hi, welcome to Warblog. So what we got here is the 1982 Iran-Iraq War. This is a particular situation in the sort of northern part of the Iranian border with Iraq. Turkey is probably a little further over here, maybe a lot further. I can't obviously point the mouse up, and Russia will be a bit further up that way, or whatever it is, the Azerbaijan or whatever is over here. Essentially, there's a bit of background on this. I'm trying to get my book. I don't know much about this campaign or this scenario, but the its background is in 1981. Basically, I'll read some of the text out. As the last snows were melting in the first week of April 1981, the Kurdish resistance, headed by Abdulrahman Gassimilow, launched a general insurrection. So there's this general insurrection, which is basically, this is Iran, and they basically rose up and they took certain cities. Some cities just came over to them naturally. Some they had to fight for. Including every faction's troops, the insurrection had close to 40,000 combatants, and at the time the Iranians only had about 20,000 troops facing them. Basically, they had 4 regular army brigades, it says, 1 from the 28th Division and 3 from the 64th Division. So the 28th will be the mechanized and 64th is the infantry. And they had about a dozen Peshmergas battalions, basically totaling 20,000 people. In alliance with the Kamala activists, the People's Fedayeen descended on the principal cities. They disarmed a number of Pashturan who had enrolled to fight the Iraqis rather than their Iranian brothers. This was the case in Piranshahr, which is a strategic town that controlled access to one of the few roads leading to Iranian Kurdistan. So let's just look at Piranshahr. Piranshahr is over here, and there's a road going into Iraq there. We're going to get on to the significance of these locations: Saqqez, Baneh, Sardasht, and Piranshahr. If I can say that properly. So essentially, they rose up, and they basically took a lot of towns. The Iraqi army did not directly participate in the insurrection, but continued to supply the combatants with munitions. Over the 6 weeks, the Kurds took control of Urmia, Nakkadeh, Mahabad, Bukhan, and Saqqez. So if you look at that, they took control of Saqqez, which is there, and they took control of Bukhan, which is there. They didn't get. They took Piranshahr. I'm pretty sure we just covered that. I think they disarmed the people there. That's what it infers. But basically, they had pretty much most of this territory. But by 1982, let me just cover 1981 just to finish that. Only the cities of Marivan and Sanandaj, and I think they're both a little further down here, because this whole enclave actually goes a little further down here. Resisted their assault. In May, Abdulrahman Gassimilow decided to focus his efforts on Sanandaj, hoping that its fall would convince the Marivan garrison to surrender. Having surrounded the city, his troops launched a series of deadly assaults, slowly advancing from one neighbourhood to the next. His Iranian defenders displayed the same tenacity seen in Khorramshahr, resisting for a month before being forced to surrender due to lack of munitions. In the Battle of Sanandaj, government troops lost 1,000 men, and the Kurdish rebels lost nearly 2,000. By late June 1981, Abdulrahman Gasemlo could boast of having liberated nearly all of Iranian Kurdistan, with the exception of Marivan, which refused to surrender despite its isolation. Exhausted, the Peshmerga no longer had the means to recapture the city. So that's the sort of background as to what happened. Now, we've got a small sort of quantum leap, because I'm skipping forward like 100 pages in the book to basically November 1982. So we've gone through the spring and the summer. So what we're assuming is they gained some ground here, because obviously this is the line that they've got at that time, November 1982, and I'm basing that on a map. I'm using the book The Iran-Iraq War by Piranshahr. It's not to be confused with the book called The Iran-Iraq War by Murray and Woods, which pretty much glosses over 1982. It has the Operation Ramadan, as it calls it, which I'm assuming is the Blessed Ramadan Offensive of July 1331. So we've sort of we're making that assumption that it doesn't really cover it. It's not a battle that is in Wikipedia. And just taking a couple of steps back, just sort of thinking, the insurrection might be in its own right an interesting scenario, and I could almost use the same map, but there's a few things sort of cut off. So anyway, there's plenty of battles to be done. I'll read out the thing that relates to 1981, save me just sort of maybe explaining it myself. I won't maybe read it all out, but there's only 2 paragraphs. This whole map is based on 2 paragraphs and a little map that sort of shows the deployments approximately in this way. In mid-September, the Iranian authorities had launched a new offensive in Kurdistan province to regain control of the border road between Saqqez and Piranshahr. So, again, just going back to the significance, Piranshahr, Saqqez, so the road between them is this, up there. So this is what they're trying to secure. Basically, it was in the heart. The road between Saqqez and Piranshahr was in the heart of the PDKI sanctuary. This road, which wound through the Garbi Mountains, which is presumably what all this is, was the backbone of the Peshmergas logistics system. Like the Ho Chi Minh Trail, like the Ho Chi Minh Trail had been for the Viet Cong. So they're basically getting all their supplies along this road, and basically through from Iraq, because Iraq was pretty much supplying them. So one thing you'll have also noticed, this is under the sort of Iran-Iraq war, but there's no Iraqi units. Iraq wasn't, obviously they're getting the Peshmergas here, the Kurds, to actually, present, the front in this area. So it's interesting from that perspective as well. So the Peshmergas use this road for most of their weapon and equipment deliveries, travelling via the passes leading from the Iraqi border to the cities of Sardasht and Baneh. So Sardasht and Baneh are there. So these are their 2 sort of strongholds, and these are the ones that should have objective markers on them. They haven't at the moment, and so that's what we'll have to go back and do. The Iranians mobilised 80,000 men divided into 3 regular divisions, and so what we're looking at here, this is the 64th Infantry Division that I've sort of basically spread across, and they've got pretty much sort of, well, let me look at my notes, they've got 30 infantry regiments, 5 artillery and 5 mechanised units. They also had the 16th Armoured, which are over here, up here. I did and ah about spreading them out, but I just plonked them all in the same place, a bit easier, but it's a bit of a pain because you probably can't get them over here. The only way to engage them is to come down here. But they did say they were trying to get this road, and the other one, the 28th Mechanised Division, is down here. And again, they could possibly, I don't think the mechanised units can go through mountains, so they're probably going to again be stuck coming down this road. So I'm not sure how well this game is going to play balance-wise with regards to sort of, how you can use a strategy, because it's basically going to be this huge stack plonking down here like Godzilla, stomping on everyone. And I did sort of think that really it's probably not going to play as realistically as it should do. I was thinking, well, there could be limits to how much you can put in one of these mountain passes or these mountain roads. Maybe you should only have stacking limits of up to one battalion at a time. So no matter what you've got, you will only have one battalion facing, a maximum of the equivalent of another battalion at a time, and there'd be conflict and attrition, and then this, they'd be swapping, fatigued units with fresh units, and as opposed to having this sort of Godzilla battle of massive stacks. But you can play it how you want. You get the map for the general sort of layout. That's pretty much what I'm trying to do. Some games are not going to be as suited to reflecting as a simulation what actually happened. But you can if you want to impose your own stacking limits of one regiment at a time, you can do it that way. So anyway, fierce fighting stretched on for several weeks, leaving 2,500 dead among the Pasdaran, and twice that in the governmental forces. Now that's what it says. I haven't put the Pasdaran in, so you can maybe assume that these are sort of the 64th are pretty much the Pasdaran, which was sort of like the cannon fodder, I think, for the Iranians. It doesn't say how many the Peshmergas have lost, but the Pasdaran and the regular army soldiers occupied several sections of the strategic road, but were unable to take control of Sardasht and Baneh. So essentially, you've got to take these two places, and historically the Iranians failed to take those. So historically they're going to fight their way down here, maybe take Mirabad, Vavan, but they're not going to take Sardasht, and likewise they're going to might take Amir Beb, get through this position and not take that. But I'm sort of thinking, well, what's the strategic implications of actually passing through the mountains? Could they have actually done that? Are these mountain tops unpassable? Because otherwise you could sort of say, well, sod that, I won't go through here, I'll just travel this way, cut this road off here and come from this way, and I'm pretty sure you could make a mess of the sort of, the purity of the strategic, situation, the implications of that situation by, just moving hex counters around using the rules. But if you, play it at heart, you should get a flavour for what this scenario is all about. Basically, they were unable to take control of Sardasht and Baneh, and those two cities were still under the Peshmergas' control when the snow began to cover the area in late November, putting an end to the Iranian offensive. So, look away. So that's sort of, I think it's an interesting setup. It's sort of, it's in the the midst of the Iran-Iraq war, and there aren't really any Iraqis sort of at play. So, and the reason that the Iranians couldn't deal with this when the insurrection took place was they just didn't have the manpower. They did all they could do was use their troops to defend further south, and so this was a real sort of thorn. So hopefully that should give you a sort of a good impression of what was happening. I mean, what intrigues me to some extent about this battle is that, it's only in that book. There's no Wikipedia for this, so this is a bit of a unique map. A lot of the battles, it's probably not particularly major, but 7,500 Iranians died, in 2 weeks of battle, so it's probably pretty intense. So nothing to be sniffed at, but even so, it's quite difficult to find. The only thing I will say, and I've noted this before, is a bit odd, but if you Google some of these names, actually, I'm not sure what, but if you do Google something like Iran-Iraq War Sardasht or Iran-Iraq War Baneh or something like that, you actually get the PDF version of the Razal book, Iran-Iraq War, with its sort of not the full version, but the snippets, and it's one of the parts that you can actually read. So I've got about 6 seconds left, so that's that. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll speak to you later. Bye.